All right, hello everybody. Welcome to episode number 461 of the Restoring Rapport podcast. This is a podcast for young believers who are pursuing the goal of marriage and family, trying to get married as young as possible in a healthy way, according to God's design. My name is Seth Hensley. I come on the show twice a week, every week on Thursday and Sunday, to discuss not only the benefits of getting married young, but I try to equip and encourage you in your pursuit of those goals. And today we're going to be reviewing a video by JP Gance, and he is a guy that I like to listen to a lot, or I'm discovering recently, because he is the guy behind Communio. So those of you who don't remember Communio, it's the source for churches, basically encouraging them to invest more in their marriage ministries and encourage young believers in general to get married and have children. And so really, really cool. This guy knows his stuff. He knows a lot about this topic. And naturally, somebody who's interested in this topic, that's why I'm, curious about everything that he says. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start, and you'll get my reaction, as well as hopefully a couple pieces of knowledge that you didn't have before you listened to this video.
you know, we don't always know it. There's kind of a joke when people talk about when did Rome fall. If you went back in the time machine, the folks would have said it was like a Tuesday. They didn't know that it was, it was the end of things. And I think we're experiencing a lot of revolutionary stuff right now in our society that we'll look back at and really
For sure.
wonder what was going on. We're at a moment where about half of all adults are not married. There's 31% people less. There are 31% less marriages happening now than in the year 2000, and there are 65% less marriages now than in the year 1970. Right? And so if you think that it's changing and transforming the nature and over time the number of adults who come of age. Right? It's driving down the fertility rate. Right?
Yeah, and collapsing the population and making it to where there's not going to be enough people to take care of the next generation. But
also drives safety.
excuse me, yeah, you think about entitlements and how do we fund all the entitlements that we have, and it seems like some people think that migration is the only way to solve those
Sure.
issues. But
No, and that's right. And I think that's the unspoken part of policy right now, which in so many ways, the birth dearth, so to speak, the idea is to paper it over with immigration, and the reality is it papers over a lot of things. One of which, married men generally don't commit violent crimes at the rate of single men.
yeah,
Okay, there aren't a lot of
Yeah. And okay, so why shouldn't we why does migration not solve the fertility crisis that we're having in the country today? There's one big reason, okay, that he talked about. The married men are just less likely to do a lot of bad stuff, okay? Because marriage civilizes men, okay? It really gives them something to mature for, it gives them incentive to make good decisions that they would not otherwise have in their single lives. Like, if I just think, let's compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. I don't want to compare my dad, who is awesome, to like the worst single guy that I know, but let's compare a good single guy that I know to a good married guy that I know. Okay, and let's kind of I'm not going to use a name, obviously, for the single guys. I'm not going to throw out names or anything, but I will use my dad's name because he's awesome. Okay, so let's compare them. You've got the married guys generally making a little bit more money. Has a wife and kids to take care of, so he can't just go to McDonald's and work to get enough money to fund his own hobbies. He's actually funding a roof over someone else's head. He's funding food for lots of people. He's got bills that he's paying, not just for himself, but for a lot of people. So he's taking on more responsibility, has to make more money to do that. So they're making more money. You got the single guy. Let's look at his finances. He's saving up only for himself, probably living with someone else, because there's no reason for him to live by himself, because he's saving. I mean, he's able to just use all his money as something, as his own expendable income, because he's with either parents or some other, maybe like he's splitting an apartment with like three other guys so that their bills are lower, and he's just working a small job to fund his bill that's split four ways, and his hobbies. Okay, so you got him doing that. It's like there's nothing wrong with that, but he's also not contributing at the level that the married guy is. Okay, and so I think that's just something like you can, on average, people contribute more. Okay, let's look at sexual health. You got the single guy. bless his heart, doing his best, but he's addicted to porn. He's developing a lot of unhealthy sexual coping mechanisms and buying a lot of false sexual narratives and doing a lot of frankly immoral things. And then you've got the married guy who has pursued God's design for a healthy sexual relationship and is the wife or the husband of one wife, and is, as Scripture would say, and is laying down his life for his wife and discovering the joy that comes through that in a marriage. He has a reason to be faithful. He's not just running around sleeping with anybody. He has a reason to be faithful to one person. His life will explode if he starts making more risky sexual decisions, and so he has that incentive to not do that. You have the let's look at hospitality and the amount that these people can serve. So like the married guy, because he has a family, has an actual place through which he can provide and contribute to his broader community and contribute and have people over for dinner and serve people in his home and take care of people and meet needs in his home. The other guy again does not have that because he doesn't have a home because he doesn't need to support anybody other than himself. Okay, so in both these cases, these guys are yes, they're doing their best, but they have different motivations and therefore the fruit is different. One has more of a motivation to serve and contribute because he has a wife and children, and the other has less of an incentive and motivation to do that, and therefore is just doing less. Both are moral people for the most part. Both have their own flaws, but one is simply motivated to do good things for society more than the other and make better decisions than the other because consequences don't just fall on his head should he go off the tracks, but they fall on other people's head, and that is what really matures men when they learn to protect people from that.
Married men with children who go out and say, "I'm going to riot this, this Tuesday," right? If few things predict the safety of a neighborhood more than the number of married households in that neighborhood.
And this is why cities are more unsafe. Okay, it doesn't have to. It's not a racial issue. It's not a something that it just happens in cities because there's more money to be had there or people are more vulnerable or anything like that. It happens because of culture and it happens because of the demographic of people living in cities. People who live in cities are younger, like 18 to 34. Okay, they're late teens, early 30s. People who are younger, single, living it up, going after life experiences for themselves. That's who lives in the cities. Okay. And so those people do not have as much incentive or motivation to make good decisions and definitely don't have consequences for other people that they have to consider. They're just thinking about themselves. And so they usually end up making poor decisions. Single people abuse single men, I should say, not single people. Don't want to overgeneralize, but I do know this is true. At least it was as far as whenever Kay Heimowitz and David Brooks did their research. Single men do usually die sooner in life than married men. They survive major operations less often. They are more likely to be addicted to drugs and alcohol. They're more likely to be involved in violent crime. All of this stuff because, again, they don't have the motivation. So this is why you see cities have more violence than rural areas. It's because of the people that are living there. You don't have a lot of married families. You don't have a lot of families, period. You just have a bunch of like very small communal groups or just a bunch of single people who are just trying to advance their own personal life and therefore don't have as much of a reason to follow moral rules. And so, yeah, that's one reason.
Or our women, the women in our lives, our children, women who are married are way less likely to be victims of violence. Okay, not just
no kidding.
In the sense that if somebody
no kidding, you're way less likely to be a victim. Like a lot of these stats and measurements he's talking about, I wouldn't even need him to tell me in order to guess. Because think about it, if you are a woman and you are walking around, let's assume you're in a safe neighborhood. It doesn't matter how dangerous the neighborhood is. It could be Detroit at night, or it could be like a rural area in broad daylight. It doesn't matter. You're more safe in both cases because you have somebody who's stronger than you, who's very interested in protecting you. Okay, assuming of course that you married a good man, which I'm assuming you had wisdom there, and you married somebody that was strong, and then you married somebody that cared about you and all that. Setting that issue aside, assuming you married a good man, you have somebody here who's like a burly fighter who's very interested in keeping you safe, who loves you very much, and who would never let anything bad happen to you. The single women don't have that. You just have at most a group of girls who are out on the town together in a group to avoid getting hit on or put in a weird situation. They're just grouping up and trying to avoid it that way, like, which is fine. But a better way to solve this, that light is flickering. Why is it flickering? That's weird. A better way to solve this would be to have a man, because a man, again, is more capable of protecting you than just a bunch of girls. No offense to a bunch of girls, I think that's great. I'm just saying, like, as a general rule, this is common sense. You're more safe if you have somebody who's strong, who loves you, than you are if you don't have somebody strong who loves you. It doesn't matter how dangerous your area is.
Cohabiting, she's more likely to be a victim of violence to the man in her life, but then also in other ways.
Wow.
I do know this too. In fact, I might pull this chart up for you while I'm talking to you. It's basically pointing out that you have, this is from a book by Brad Wilcox called "Get Married: Why Americans Must Defy the Elites, Forge Strong Families, and Save Civilization." I'm going to put it over here for you and then full screen it. Hopefully you can see this. Let's see if yes, that looks like it was pulled up right. But what I want to highlight for you is the violence that can happen in cohabiting relationships, not to the woman, but to the children that she may have had from previous marriages. Okay. The amount of, here it is, child abuse is more common in non-intact families. Let's look at this. Okay, so everybody can get on board with preventing child abuse. So let's identify some common situations in which child abuse occurs. Okay, and I think what you're going to notice here is that a lot of the child abuse that happens is coming from a non-intact family. Okay, if you have an intact family, mother, father, children, that is like the least likely situation in which child abuse actually occurs. Most of the time, it's a stepfather that does the abuse, or a cohabiting partner of the mom that does the abuse, or somebody who lives in the home that somehow has access to the children a lot that does the abuse, and it's not the biological father of these children. Okay, and let's just look at this. So, figure 4.4, child abuse more common in non-intact families. A number of children who experience the incidence of harm per 1,000 children. Okay, so married with biological children, 1.9 experienced, out of 1,000 experienced physical abuse. 0.5 experienced sexual abuse out of 1,000 children when it was married with biological parents, when they were raised in a home of their married biological parents. And then 0.8 experienced emotional abuse if the children were, and this is out of 1,000. So you have, if children are being raised by their biological parents, 1.9 out of 1,000 experience physical abuse, 0.5 experience sexual abuse, and 0.8 experience emotional abuse. Okay, here's where it gets crazy. Here's where we're going to start to notice things. If children are living in a home with other married parents, meaning not their biological parents, but other married parents, it goes to 9.8 experience out of 1,000 experience physical abuse. So it's times 9. They're 9 times more likely to experience physical abuse. Okay, 4.3 out of 1,000 have experienced sexual abuse, and 5 have experienced emotional abuse, just because they were raised in a home with parents that were not theirs, even though those parents were married. Okay, here's where it gets really crazy. Okay, well, actually, it doesn't get crazy for another 2, but unmarried partners, if you have like people who are cohabiting, if they're raised in a cohabiting home, I think you have 8.2 out of 1,000 who have experienced physical abuse, 2.4 have experienced sexual abuse, and 2.5 have experienced emotional abuse. Again, you can see everything is higher. All of these are higher likelihood of your child experiencing abuse than if they were raised in a home with their biological married parents. Okay, let's go down to single with a partner. So let's say that their mom is single, she's divorced, she had a child, or maybe she's just single for whatever reason. She's either divorced or she had a child outside of wedlock. Either way, she's single, she's looking for a man, and she has a child. Okay, 19.5 out of 1,000 experience abuse. Okay, which is still not a crazy number, but it's 19 times higher than the child. That child is 19 times more likely to experience physical abuse than the kid who's raised in a home with his or her biological parents. Isn't that crazy? Like that stat blows my mind. Like, you make your child's odds of experiencing 19 times higher if you are a single parent with a partner. Okay, like what? And people say like, oh, marriage is not a big deal, it doesn't make a difference. It's like, no, it makes a huge difference. Not just let's set aside you for a minute and the difference it makes for you. Let's look at it how it impacts your children. Your child is 19 times more likely to be physically abused if you are single with a partner than a child who is living with their married biological parents. That is not something to minimize. That's not something to sweep under the rug. That's not something to ignore. That is something to be aware of when it comes to the fact that not all romantic relationships are created equal. Okay. And some produce better fruit than others. And we need to be aware of what marriage can do for your life and your child. Okay. Marriage can really improve children's lives. All right. Um, if a child is living with a single parent who has a partner, it's 9.9 out of 1,000 experience sexual abuse, and 8.2 out of 1,000 experience emotional abuse. If a child's living with a single parent without a partner, it's still higher than the married people. So the partner is still more likely to abuse their child in these ways. Like, this is crazy. 5.9 of 1,000 experience physical abuse when they fit in that category. 2.9 experience sexual abuse, and or 2.4, sorry, and 2.9 experience emotional abuse. And then if a child is, listen, here's the even crazier part. If a child is living with neither parent, so either they're an orphan or they're being raised by somebody other than their parent, 6.8 out of 1,000 experience physical abuse, 5.3 out of 1,000 experience sexual abuse, and 4 experience out of 1,000 experience emotional abuse. So, what is the greatest? What's the living situation that most protects children from physical, sexual, and emotional abuse? Ding, ding, ding! It's right here at the top. A child who's raised in a home with their married biological parents. Okay, married biological parents. It's a big deal. Am I saying adoption and foster care is bad? Absolutely not. Am I saying cohabitation is worse than singleness? Um, I mean, as far as these numbers go, it is. Actually, let's look. Single with a partner and single without a partner. Yeah, let's see here. Unmarried partners. Yeah, it is worse in almost all categories. There's a couple that it's better than in, but the point is that marriage blows all of these romantic living situation out of the water as far as the results it produces for children and the likelihood that these children will ever experience any kind of abuse in their life. I think that's not anything to be forgotten about. Like, we need to remember that. And keep that in mind when we're deciding what kind of a romantic relationship am I going to have as a young person. Like, young people need to have this information available.
Um, Husbands generally and wives care for each other and help them avoid risky situations, and that's one of the reasons uh, married women are less prone to be the victims of violence. So there's a myriad. You name it. The effects of this are legion.
Mm. Well, I think, if you think about, I heard you, discussing a few things off camera, which is, when you break down the voter divide, it's a gender divide in the country. It's women vote Democrat,
Yeah.
men vote Republican. That's a general term. That's a
general
thesis.
Which, by the way, you get all these red pillars that we'll talk about that. Oh, all the young women are voting left, and all the young men are voting right, and they'll basically make women sound stupid. Some of them will. Some of them do not do this. Again, there are lots of good men out there, but there are some guys out there that will make women sound stupid and make women sound like the problem. But the question you have to ask yourself is, okay, why are women reacting that way? Why are women going to one extreme and voting on one extreme? It's probably not just because they're the sole problem. Like, it's not just because women are innately evil, which is somehow believed by a lot of men today because of their poor experience with women. But you need to ask yourself, why are the women doing this? And I would posit to you that perhaps the reason women are running to the government to protect them is because we have done a poor job protecting them ourselves as men. Okay, and I don't mean in a broad societal sense, I mean in a specific sense. Women, if they do not have a married partner to protect them, are probably going to run to someone else for covering and protection. And sadly, it's not the church anymore. And sadly, the government is stepping in and doing that. And I don't think the government is a great bastion of security or fortress of, protection when it's compared to what should have been the fortress of protection for women, and that is husbands. Okay. And so, like, yeah, it's not just the women's fault. It's just the women. They're not stupid. They're probably going to go to where they feel safer. And I'm sorry, if they feel safer having their needs met and being protected by the government or any kind of institution or collaborative effort or anything, then they feel protected with you as a husband. Or, I mean, that says a lot about the quality of a job you're doing as a husband. I mean, um, and so yeah, I just think we need to be really careful to make sure our wife feels safe. My wife has to feel safe. Make that your mission statement as a man. My wife has to feel safe. My wife will feel safe, or I'm not doing my job. Okay. My wife will feel protected, cared for, loved, served, or I'm not doing my job. And if she's not feeling those things and running to other people for those things, maybe it's not the government. Maybe she's not running to the government for that. Maybe she's going to her friends or going to her family that she was raised with, because you're not doing your job. To me, that's just an embarrassing situation. Not because it makes her look bad, but because it makes you look bad. Okay? Um, just a thought. Like, I just see a lot of husbands that seem very low quality. And I'm not saying the women are absolved from this either, because let me tell you, they picked a husband that was absolute trash. So that shows the pretty good, lack of foresight and wisdom on their end. I'm not saying they're blame free, but what I am saying is, like, that doesn't excuse like, okay, a woman's bad choice does not excuse a husband's poor performance. Does that make sense? We need to know that, like, both sides are to blame here. Okay, both men and women are to blame here. This is not you can't just throw and shift the blame to one side of the sex aisle, and expect that there's nothing you could have done better. No problem that you have. That's just arrogance and stupidity. Okay.
But
When you when you scratch beneath the surface,
yeah,
it's really a marriage divide.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, you have these two opposing worldviews or political views that create, a divide amongst the sexes. And,
Yeah.
when grandma or when your uncle won't have you over for Thanksgiving because you disagree with them in politics, how can you expect to date somebody who has a disagreement in politics? What do you think is the key to bridging this, gender divide, and how do men and
Great
women
question.
take each
Great
other
question.
seriously and treat each other with respect and dignity? And how do men lead the charge in, trying to find a mate that is somebody worth marrying and worth having a family in the world that we live in right now, where if you look at the dating pool, or a lot of these men look around at the dating pool and they say, I don't want anything to do with this.
Yeah, well, we have to get back to the biblical idea of complementarity.
Mm.
I think over the last 20 years, what's accelerated is a us versus them dialectic between the sexes, and that's is all, you could put a line in the sand, and the advent of second wave feminism, which in many ways sought to blur the differences between and dissolve the differences between men and women, and disrupt the idea of what is the human person.
Ugh.
And now there's an adversarial dialectic that young women and men are hearing frequently, and I think this is an opportunity for the church to one, stop dumping on men, okay? Because there's sort of like a bit of a hangover, it might say BoomerCon idea, that you just there's a problem, okay, we give into the Homer Simpson idea of men, and there's a both problem.
Yes,
there's a both
100%,
problem going on.
100%.
And both sides of the street need to clean up their act. And so we need each other. God has literally made us man and woman, and physically are aren't fully ourselves without the other, right?
Mm-hmm.
Through the
Yes.
sexual embrace, and so in different ways, God made us to be in a healthy way to depend on each other.
Yes.
And so
100%.
when we get
100%.
into an adversarial idea of the sexes and we only point out the challenges of one side of the street, we're not, you know, we're ignoring the plank in our own eye.
Yes.
Okay. And so I
And
think
also,
from,
let's pause. Okay, so what the guy asked was, he was like, so if all the women are voting left and all the young guys are, if all the young women are voting left and all the young guys are voting right, and people are so emotionally invested in their politics, how are we expected to have families at all? How are young people expected to tie the knot and get married, much less even date each other, if they have such disagreements over political issues? And I think what we need to get back to here is values instead of politics. Okay, what we have, because that's going to give men and women a lot of commonality here. Okay, let's go back to, and this is a podcast for young believers. Let's go back to the Bible instead of turning on our social media feed and listening to whatever commentator on whatever side on whatever issue. Like, this should be a values thing instead of a politics thing. Number one, because it's less divisive and polarizing. Okay. Number two, because you'll find out, hey, we have more in common than we really think. And number three, because scriptural advice is what leads men to be good providers, protectors, and leaders and husbands. And scripture is what good leads women to be good wives. Okay. And so if you throw all of the politics out of it and you take good scriptural advice, you will have a great marriage. You will, 100%. And so, what is guiding our decision? Like, how are we deciding who is a good person to marry, who's not a good person to marry? What is a good, attractive quality to have in a husband? What's an attractive quality to have in a wife? What are qualities that you don't want to have in a husband or wife? You need to be looking at scripture to inform those and not politics. Okay, politics is not inspired by God. Your commentator that you listen to on whatever issue may be very skilled, may be very rhetorically gifted, maybe have put a lot of practice and thought and time into their topic, and even know the stats and know the numbers on whatever topic they're talking about. But what they're not good at is giving you scriptural and inspired marriage advice. And so I think we just, okay, how do we fix the divide? You got all the men voting right, you got all the women voting left. I see the problem. I'm not stupid. I know that's a problem. Okay. How do you overcome that and have men and women getting married again, because we need each other? That's what we need. Hopefully nobody, I don't think anybody who is honest and takes a good, consideration on the issue, I don't think anybody will tell you that men and women don't need each other. We desperately do. We desperately need each other. And so, how do we get them together again? How do we get them together? Well, start looking for values instead of political agreement. Start looking for scriptural qualities that make a good husband or wife instead of, political qualities that make a good husband or wife. And I think you will find that you have more in common than you think by doing that.
from a teaching and preaching perspective, I think we would do well to be balanced in this. Then we need to also facilitate and help our young men and women meet in real life. It's easy to be keyboard warriors and dump on each other, but we need the local church should be a place where men and women meet in real life, and that gosh, more than half of young adult men have said they've never asked a girl out in person or on the phone. And I don't mean by text, that doesn't count. I mean,
or
like
a dating app.
Right. So we have to actually encourage men to.
Well, again, the way to facilitate meetings, again, I think church actually can be a great way to do that, but I don't think it always works, because that wasn't my experience, and I went to, let's see, like 3 or 4 churches for years and years and years throughout my life. Like long term, I didn't just like visit. I was actually there long term, and so I don't think it guarantees success, because I did not find my partner that way. But what I will tell you, I actually did find my wife. Well, technically, I met her online. I did meet her in person through a church a Sunday morning service, that was nice. I still remember the first time I ever saw her in person. It seems like, guys, it seems like a different lifetime. It seems like it was like 50 years ago, because of how much we've done together since then and how much we talk and stuff. And I don't know, but do think that he has a point that churches can facilitate those meetings. Now, I don't think those always work, and that's when you have to. You can't just give up. You definitely can't just keep looking in that church if there's no young people there. So you have to have another approach to find somebody. And I would recommend the social media networking method, which I've talked about a million times before. But I'll tell you briefly, just one more time, to close this podcast off, because I really do think it works. If you are looking for a partner, you need to go onto your Facebook friends list. Listen, there's a wrong way to date using social media, and there's a wrong way to date using. I would say dating apps are way more inferior to social media when it comes to finding a partner. And I would say social media doesn't work at all unless you do it this way. Okay. Go to your Facebook friends list, find people that you trust. That not girls. I'm talking just anybody on your friends list. Could be an older person, could be somebody your age, could be somebody you went to school with, could be a boss, coworker, relative, friend, anybody, family friend, even. It does not matter. It does not matter. Anybody you trust. I want you to make a list of those people, okay? And then I want you to go to their friends list. If their friends list is public, I want you to go through and look for any woman who you find attractive who advertises herself with the qualities that Scripture describes as a good wife having. Okay, so if you look through your friends list and you find any of those people, I want you to reach out to your mutual friend, not to her. Please do not reach out to her. That I don't think that usually works. For a number of reasons I won't get into now, but you need to reach out to your mutual friend and bring her up and say, hey, I noticed you were friends with this person. I thought she was very attractive and seems to advertise herself as a good person online. Do you know if she's interested in a dating relationship right now? Thanks so much. Have a great day. Okay. Your mutual friend will probably then praise you to the skies to this person. Okay. And facilitate a meeting if the woman is also interested. If she is not interested, then your mutual friend will get back to you with an unfavorable response, and you won't have been rejected to your face. You'll just know that woman's not interested, and I can then move on and look for somebody else who I find attractive, who has my worldview and my scriptural values, that is also on my trusted friends list. Because what you do by looking at your friends list is you multiply the number of people with a solid worldview that you have access to exponentially, because you have a lot of people you probably trust on your Facebook friends list. Hopefully you do. I hope. My fingers crossed you do. And then all of those people know people. Okay, and so now your fingers are in a whole lot of pies, so to speak, because you have a much broader access to the world, and all these people, your mutual friend can be a character reference for you. To these girls or boys. Hey, this works for boys too. Like if you're a girl listening to this, same thing. And this way also you don't have to be the pursuer. Like a lot of girls want to be pursued by a guy. I don't blame you. So this is a great way to do that. Just open the door for him without pursuing. Okay. By having a character reference through your mutual friend, making sure that this guy's safe or this girl's safe, your mutual friend will tell you if it's not somebody they'd recommend for you. They'll be like, hey, I really love you. Would not recommend that person, okay? Because they know something about that person that you don't, okay? Just by looking at their Facebook. This is another way. Everybody has a character reference in this scenario that I'm describing. It's a lot safer to date this way, in my opinion, and to meet people in this way. And so I would recommend that if you guys have found this episode interesting, and if you try that method, please let me know. But if you found this episode interesting, please let me know through the YouTube comments or reach out through the podcast Facebook and Instagram page. Would love to hear from you. Would make this a conversation instead of a monologue. So definitely do that. Thank you so much for listening today. God bless you guys, and I will talk to you all next time.